Breaking news, everyone. We've got participation trophies for David Zaslav's next yacht payment. That's right. He may have invested this much money, but if we change the titles enough, you'll think he's doing better than those movies the internet wants you to hate. So, the current headline is that the new Superman movie is the best opening for a solo Superman movie in the domestic market since blah, 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 blah. First of all, domestic doesn't matter. Worldwide total gross is what matters. And on top of that, when you have more heroes and characters in your debut movie than the original 2012 Avengers did, it's not a solo movie. So really, they should be comparing this to Avengers and X-Men movies. But they're not going to do that because it wouldn't be able to compete with that. Probably won't be able to compete with Fantastic Four, which somehow has fewer characters in it than the solo movie does. Domestic is a really cool way to compare individual market, US to US, China to China, whatever. So depending on where you are, it's really helpful to compare apples to apples. How is your IP performing with this demographic? It's why I was so shocked when James Gunn decided to start rattling off hate speech against people in India, and his followers took what was an old man letting out his racist stereotypes and turned it into overt, straight up racism. And what's worse is that the people who are talking about this are only talking about the excitement of beating the movie that they hate, which isn't kind or punk rock, and it flies in the face of the you can like both movement. This is the budget for the new Superman movie. Now, when I was growing up, the way that you saw if a movie was able to break even is if you multiplied that by two, that's the finish line you need to cross to be profitable. Nowadays, people say 2.5 because apparently there's a bigger focus on advertising. The new Superman movie did an international month-long, they called it a Superman tour to churn up excitement. They projected the Superman logo on things. They had Superman hanging from like big buildings in international markets to try and draw attention. They flew influencers out for special screenings and sent them merch. They hired a bunch of influencers to run DC related shows for them and drum up artificial hype. So they've certainly spent a great deal of money on the Superman promo. Now, here's the budgets for James Gunn's Marvel movies. So you can see it's not really that far out of the extreme for him to film at that level. This is the network he's used to operating within, and likely not having as much of the Disney infrastructure caused slight inflation in what he was spending. That and inflation is real as much as people want to pretend it doesn't exist. It does make the cost of individual components in the film process, including the use of the volume, which James said he would never use, and then showed that he did use it. Um, I'm not trying to be a dick to the guy, but he does compulsively lie, and he does operate at a specific price point. And this movie has not made a profit based on that price point. Worse, the new movie, I don't care if people said post-COVID economy, which is a bullshit term. Again, I point to Jurassic. I point to F1, who F1 has made more money than the Superman movie. That's insane. I look at Avatar, Way of Water, making stupid money, and I love that. The idea that this doesn't work is stupid, especially when The Batman made more money with less heroes, was an actual solo superhero movie at the height of the pandemic when people were still being told to wear masks and not be within 6 feet of each other. So you guys can try and turn this whole thing into a cudgel against fans you don't like. Sure, not very kind, not very punk rock, kind of proves you're just assholes hiding behind a Superman logo, which, to be fair, the Superman logo does represent conquering and violently subjugating everyone you don't like. So, in some ways, congratulations, you are emboldening the concepts that the L's apparently stand for in the DCU. Kudos to that. But you're not actually beating Man of Steel. You're certainly not beating Batman v Superman, which James Gunn has never outgrossed in anything at all. Hiding from the fact that inflation does exist is silly, and it kind of just makes me think you guys know the movies can't compete on a fair playing field. Again, I understand that the ticket prices, it's not the same thing. Ticket prices have almost doubled since Man of Steel came out, so you're not going to get an apples to apples comparison. But it's just so weird that this whole you can love both. James and Zach are friends. There's room for everyone at the table until there's a victory on the board for the DCU. And then the only reason people are excited is to bash Zack Snyder and his fandom. That's not cool. It's toxic, it's lame, it's cringe, especially since you have to come up with special qualifiers to hide the fact that you're underperforming a 12-year-old movie and acting like a 12-year-old boy. So there's a debunking It's called math. Try it out sometime.